What would you do if you ran out of money? Most people would say they'd earn more or borrow some. But Sonny chose the most dangerous and difficult method, printing his own money. He first crumpled up banknotes and soaked them in tea until they were thoroughly saturated. Only then was he satisfied and took them out. Sonny then gently unfolded the bills. Just like that, the once crisp notes transformed into worn currency. Next, they submerged all the bills in tea, repeating the earlier steps. They hung the notes on a string and dried them with a hairdryer. It turns out these bills were all freshly made counterfeits. They went through this process to make the fake money look authentic enough to pass as real. To test if the money could be spent, the two cautiously visited a snack shop. Sonny handed over a counterfeit bill. Unexpectedly, the shopkeeper paused as soon as he took the money. Had they been found out? Sonny instantly panicked. Sure enough, the sharp-eyed shopkeeper noticed something amiss. Before things could escalate, his friend Little Handsome rushed forward and used all his strength to pull Sonny away from the shopkeeper's grasp. Luckily, they managed to escape in the chaotic crowd. Sonny had thought counterfeiting would be easy. He never expected his fake money to be spotted immediately. Of course, printing currency is no simple task. It's considered as classified as nuclear weapons technology. Though a banknote may seem like just a thin piece of paper, the difficulty of its production is epic. Little Handsome stared at the counterfeit in his hand, deep in thought. He quickly identified the reason for their failure. They had been wrong from the start. Indian currency uses a special cotton pulp paper that's tightly controlled by the government and nearly impossible to obtain. Even if they could get it, it wouldn't be cheap. Their counterfeit used ordinary wood pulp paper instead. The texture was noticeably different. This paper also made a crisp sound when squeezed. Of course, even with the right paper, that's just the first step. There's also the color-shifting ink on banknotes that changes hue under different lighting. Finally, there are the anti-counterfeiting tags. If they wanted their fake money to pass as genuine, they'd need to solve these issues. To produce high-quality counterfeits, the designs on the bills must be hand-drawn. Even the most advanced equipment can't scan the microtext on banknotes without producing a moire pattern. So they had to hand-draw the initial draft, then scale it down for engraving, followed by polishing and chemical processing. This completes a basic printing plate. However, due to the Indian government's strict control over cotton pulp paper, the two couldn't even buy it. They needed to find a substitute with a similar feel. After days of searching, Sonny finally spotted some hope on an advertising flyer.
Hey Firoz, touch this and see. It's too thin. Touch it now.
They discovered that by combining two sheets, they could closely mimic both the texture and thickness of real currency. Now they just needed to bleach the paper, print each side separately, perforate the front, attach the security strip, and finally use glue for a perfect seal. Just like that, they had created a counterfeit bill nearly indistinguishable from the real thing in look and feel. But achieving this level was far from enough. Having solved the paper issue, they still needed to tackle the color-shifting ink problem. Currently, the only way to obtain such ink was to brazenly rob a mint, clearly not a feasible option. That's when Sonny, being an artist, had a bright idea. Well-versed in ink pigments, he bought metal powders from the market and mixed them with ink. Amazingly, the result was truly deceptive. The pair then coated the fake bills with varnish, making them both refined and crisp. Finally, they added the finishing touch from the beginning, soaking all the counterfeits in tea, then hanging them on a clothesline to blow dry. After all, bills with signs of use are less likely to arouse suspicion. To verify the quality of this batch, they revisited the snack shop. Learning from their previous failure, they were smarter this time. Sonny took the lead, and they held hands, ready to flee if needed. "One soda," Sonny ordered nervously. As Sonny handed over the money, his heart was racing, fearing another failure and arrest. But this time, they succeeded. Sonny not only bought a soda with the fake bill but even received change from the shopkeeper. On their way out, the two could barely contain their excitement as they looked at the money and soda in their hands. Though they tried to restrain themselves, they eventually couldn't help but release their inner joy. While they had succeeded this time, their goal in counterfeiting wasn't just to get free snacks and drinks. They wanted to exchange these fake bills for real money. And so, the two embarked on their counterfeit business. A few days later, they met with a notorious crime boss. To prove the quality of their counterfeits, Sunny borrowed two 500 rupee notes from the boss. He then mixed in one of their fake bills, placed all three on the table, and shuffled them. Finally, he challenged the boss to identify the counterfeit. When the crime boss picked up the three bills, he was stunned. No matter how he turned them, he couldn't tell which one was fake. Even Sunny himself couldn't distinguish it anymore. Indeed, their counterfeits had become so perfect that they were indistinguishable from genuine currency. Seeing the crime boss's interest, Sunny stated that the minimum order for their counterfeit money would be 100,000 rupees. But the boss's next move left them completely shocked. "I want 20 million, he declared. 20 million, they echoed in disbelief. Initially planning to haggle, they never expected their first sale to be such a massive order. Sunny accepted without hesitation. "Are you crazy? 20 million? We nearly got caught making 100,000. How can we print so much?" Little Handsome protested. Faced with such an enormous quantity of counterfeit bills, their current production speed was far from adequate. Just as they were at a loss, their counterfeiting secret was finally discovered. "Did you make this?" Sunny's uncle asked, holding up a bill. "Uncle, I've thought it through. There's no other way to save the newspaper," Sunny explained. It turned out Sunny's motive for counterfeiting wasn't simply for money, but to revive his grandfather's failing newspaper business. That's why he took such a risk. But no matter how Sunny tried to explain, he couldn't justify their crime. His uncle earnestly advised Sunny to stop while he still could. Seeing he couldn't convince his uncle, Sunny reluctantly took out a banknote from his pocket. His uncle picked up the bill from the table and held it up to the light, examining it closely. He could hardly believe the bill in his hand was counterfeit. "This is fake," he asked in disbelief. "This is art," Sunny replied. To allay his uncle's concerns, Sunny took him to a restaurant. When paying the bill, he even used the counterfeit note. This behavior made his uncle break out in a cold sweat nearby, fearing they'd be pinned to the ground any second. Only when he saw the waiter return with change did his anxious heart finally settle. To print in bulk, they needed a high-speed printing press. To print 6 notes at once required a larger plate. "We need varnish, large paper rolls," Sunny listed. "At least 50 kilos of ink. The paper cutter needs a new motor. And we need a dryer for the bills." With his uncle's guidance and suggestions, they quickly prepared everything. But they still lacked one crucial material, the cotton pulp paper for printing the counterfeits. Under the Indian government's tight control, buying it was impossible. "Can we trade privately?" Sunny asked a supplier. "What's your name? Why do you need this paper?" the man questioned. "Who are you?" "Hello?" Sunny hung up abruptly. "Damn, it's easier to buy an airplane than this paper," he grumbled. The two had a sudden idea. If they couldn't buy through official channels, why not take a shortcut? Yes, they planned to rob a paper mill.
This way? Hey, I found it!
One second. What's your name?
Artist.
They finally completed the order just before the delivery deadline. To celebrate their success, Sunny invited his girlfriend of 2 years out for their first dinner together. Before, he could never afford such a high-end restaurant on his monthly salary of just 9,000 rupees. But things were different now. He had planned to make it up to his girlfriend, but her next words left Sunny completely stunned. What? Yes, I'm getting married soon. To whom? Does it matter who? All along, his girlfriend had never made their relationship public. To others, they were just friends. Even her parents didn't know Sunny existed. Clearly, she looked down on him for being poor, though Sunny had been unwilling to accept it. But now, her words pierced his fragile self-esteem like icicles falling from a winter roof. Still, Sunny felt he had let her down too much. Since this was her choice, even if he tried to win her back, it would be meaningless. Better to part ways amicably. This dinner became their last meal together. To preserve his last shred of dignity, Sunny insisted on paying the bill himself. However, his wallet didn't have enough to cover the meal. So Sunny put away his wallet and took out some of the counterfeit bills he had made from another pocket. But he could never have imagined that this action would plunge them deep into the quagmire of power and money. Those fake bills he spent successfully entered circulation. That afternoon, Little May was eating at a restaurant when she noticed something off about the change she received. But instead of asking the waiter to exchange it, she went to the counter and bought all the counterfeit bills. She then rushed back to her office. Little May inserted the fake bills into a money counter, but the machine didn't sound any alarm. She tried again, but still nothing happened. Even her colleagues were completely baffled when they saw it. If these bills were indeed counterfeit, it meant they could pass through all of India's money-checking machines undetected. The entire Indian currency verification system would become useless. In search of flaws in this banknote, they carefully examined the counterfeit under a microscope. Yet, they couldn't find a single flaw, even beginning to doubt if it might be genuine. Only after soaking the note in alcohol did they uncover the secret of this fake currency. No wonder. I knew this was a sandwich counterfeit, one remarked. Do you know what this means? Another asked. They're not a large organization. They lack resources and infrastructure. They only have an ordinary printing press and extraordinary talent. Indeed. Sunny and his small team of 3 have defeated India's entire currency verification system. Their counterfeits are of such high quality that they're highly sought after by major underground gangs. Even government officials can't resist buying these fake notes. I need 200 million, a politician requested. No problem, Sunny replied without hesitation. The politician needed substantial funds to support his campaign for the upcoming election in 2 weeks. As they worked through the night printing counterfeit notes, a police car pulled up outside their printing factory. It turned out that Little May was still investigating the counterfeit money case. She had contacted local police, requesting an inspection of all printing factories around the hotel. Now, this was the only remaining printing factory. The trio panicked at the sight of the police car outside. If they turned off the machines now, it would take too long to restart, and the delivery was due tomorrow. To hell with it. Listen, Uncle, Sunny whispered urgently. How much longer for this batch? 15 minutes, came the reply. Once this batch is done, turn off all the lights. Let them think we're closed. Just then, unexpectedly, the police called Uncle's phone. Sunny's worst fear came true as Uncle instinctively answered. Shoo, they'll hear the machine noise, Sunny warned. Wait, my signal is poor here, Uncle said into the phone. The police ordered Uncle to come to the scene immediately for questioning. If he didn't arrive within 5 minutes, they would force entry to investigate. Uncle had no choice but to agree. As he left, he signaled the brothers to hide all the counterfeit money, saying he'd use the back door and try to stall the police as long as possible. However, while Uncle was negotiating with the police, Little May unexpectedly started walking towards the main door. Just as the last counterfeit note was completed, Little Handsome immediately cut off all power switches. But Little May still heard some noises. Are the machines still running inside? She asked suspiciously. Ah, no, came the nervous reply. What are you doing here, miss? I heard machine noises, she insisted. Seeing this, the police demanded that Uncle open the door immediately to check the situation. Fortunately, when the door opened, the 2 brothers had just finished hiding all the counterfeit money. When the police entered to inspect, they found nothing unusual. Did you check the trash can? One officer asked another. I thought you did, came the reply. They realized they had forgotten to check the trash can, which contained today's discarded counterfeit notes. At this moment, Little May was walking step by step towards the trash can. Seeing this, Sunny had no choice but to tiptoe out, grabbing a wrench and following behind Little May. He was ready to act if she discovered the fake money. Just then, Little May's phone rang. Sunny immediately shrank behind a pillar, waiting for his chance. Meanwhile, the police officer who came with her also received the same call. It was from their superior, who had received a call from a high-ranking official. The superior was furious upon learning about their unauthorized investigation of the printing factory and ordered them to stop immediately. "I'm leaving right away." "I'm truly sorry," Little May said, chastened. "Long live India." "Officer, let's go," she called to the police, preparing to leave. The trio had narrowly escaped disaster. However, now was not the time for small talk. They had to quickly pack these counterfeit notes and deliver them to the client. The next day, they drove to the neighboring state to make the delivery. However, due to India's federal system, each state's jurisdiction had checkpoints, and every guard at these checkpoints carried weapons. This interstate delivery was almost like crossing national borders. Undoubtedly, such a risky endeavor was tantamount to courting death. Sure enough, they were stopped. After checking their identities, the police ordered them to get out of the car immediately, then demanded to inspect the trunk. Finally, under the police's insistence, Sunny opened the box. But just as the police were about to continue searching, Sunny intentionally bumped into a box on the side. This successfully drew the police's attention. In the end, they only found a few bottles of alcohol inside. "What's this?" "A phone book," one officer asked. "For drunk dialing?" "Sir, let's talk outside," Sunny suggested smoothly. Surprisingly, the local police were so helpful that they not only temporarily kept the money in their pockets and the 6 bottles of alcohol but also let the two pass through the checkpoint smoothly. After successfully reaching the delivery location, money and goods were exchanged simultaneously. This deal earned them a fortune, easily bringing in 60 million rupees in income. But little did they know that their actions had touched upon others' interests. A powerful criminal organization had set its sights on them. "Who did this?" the gang leader demanded. "It was you, wasn't it? I'll ask you one last time, who did this?" "I did it," Sunny admitted. The gang leader's purpose in finding the two wasn't simply to eliminate them. They were also counterfeiters themselves. The volume of counterfeit money they produced was so large that 1 in every 100 notes circulating in India was fake. Their counterfeits were so well made that ordinary people could hardly distinguish them, and even money counting machines could easily pass them. To combat these counterfeits, the Indian government upgraded all currency verification systems nationwide. Now, even a mobile phone could easily identify them. Overnight, all these counterfeit notes became worthless paper. As large numbers of counterfeiters were arrested, the truth began to surface. All the criminal evidence pointed to a man named Mansoor. Mansoor was at his wits' end with this situation. If it wasn't handled properly, their counterfeit money would eventually rot in storage. Just as he was worrying, one of his subordinates handed him a 500 rupee note. "I had someone bring this from India," the subordinate said. "What? Is this fake?" Mansoor asked. "Try it in the machine," the subordinate suggested. As Mansoor fed the note into the counting machine, his face showed an expression of disbelief. This counterfeit note had managed to fool the upgraded machine. He asked his subordinate who had forged this note, but the subordinate didn't know the counterfeiter's real name, only that he called himself the artist. Soon, the gang found Sunny and Little Handsome. Mansoor then handed Sunny the counterfeit note, asking him to point out its flaws. Sure enough, Sunny spotted the problems at a glance. The watermark is wrong. These security threads on the figure are also incorrect, they overlap. The microprinting is poorly done. Microprinting doesn't need a computer, just a bit of artistry. Mansoor, instead of being angry as expected, was impressed with the young man. He then extended an olive branch to Sunny, hoping he would join his team. Sunny would be responsible for printing the counterfeit money, while Mansoor would handle the funding, printing, and sales. If Sunny agreed to cooperate, they would be an unstoppable force. However, Sunny didn't realize the gravity of his current situation. Faced with Mansoor's proposal, he refused. I don't do that anymore," he said. "I'll kill you," Mansoor threatened. "I'll kill your whole family, burn down your grandfather's newspaper office, destroy your grandfather. Do you hear me? I could have done all that. But did I? Tell me, did I? I'm a man who greatly appreciates talent. I have immense respect for skilled individuals." To Mansoor, Sunny was his competitor. If he couldn't bring him into his fold, he certainly wouldn't let him leave alive. Finally, he gave Sunny 3 days to reconsider, even sending his men to escort the two back home. Little Handsome knew that if they refused, their lives would be in danger. He suggested to Sunny that they should go into hiding. But Sunny knew Mansoor wouldn't give up easily. This time, they had no choice but to cooperate. Moreover, this was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. All along, they had been living like rats, scraping by on meager earnings, constantly on the run. If they wanted to leave this miserable slum, they had to show the world they were the most outstanding artists. This time, they would live for themselves. Before long, they embarked on this path of no return. However, the difficulty of counterfeiting this time was not so simple. India's new 2000 rupee note was more complex than the old version, with 14 sizes and 17 different fonts, making counterfeiting almost impossible. Fortunately, they could now utilize Mansoor's resources. His factory had the same paper as the real notes, the same security threads, and even the most advanced intaglio printing machines. After dozens of trials and improvements, their counterfeit notes finally passed the verification machines.
Shall I put your note in the market? Yes, bhai. Sure. Yeah.
As the machines turned, counterfeit notes rolled out one after another. In a sense, these weren't really counterfeits anymore, but genuine notes. This time, they were printing an amount as high as 120 billion. But safely transporting this money to India would be extremely tricky. So the next day, Sunny rented a soon-to-be scrapped cargo ship. They loaded the 120 billion into 3 containers, planning to transport them by sea. Midway, they would dump the containers into the ocean. After disposing of all the counterfeit money, they would abandon the ship. The unmanned vessel, like an arrow released from its bow, headed towards the crowded beach. Unaware of the truth, people pulled out their phones to take photos, only stopping when the ship reached the shore. This unusual behavior quickly attracted police attention. However, the authorities found no evidence of counterfeit money on the ship. "Sir, I've contacted all units," an officer reported. "Coast Guard, police, tax bureau, they all say there's nothing suspicious. The ship is just loaded with waste materials." Just as the police were left puzzled, Sunny and his team returned under the cover of night. They had cleverly attached tracking devices to the containers before tossing them into the sea. Taking advantage of the distraction caused by the cargo ship, they managed to drag all the containers into the port and transport them back to their warehouse by truck. This way, they successfully smuggled 120 billion in counterfeit currency into the country. These weren't ordinary counterfeits. These notes could easily pass through all of India's cash detection machines. The only way to identify them was by burning them. The police dubbed them super counterfeits. In fact, the police had received reliable information from an informant beforehand, alerting them that 120 billion in fake currency would be transported from abroad into India. If these counterfeit notes were to enter circulation, it would inevitably cause panic among the public and potentially lead to a national economic collapse. However, the police were unaware of the method the criminal gang would use to transport these fake notes. As a result, they had to maintain tight security across various locations, guarding against all possible entry points. This strategy proved somewhat effective. Under strict surveillance, the authorities managed to seize a significant amount of counterfeit currency. "Sir, we've intercepted 20 million in Kochi. Mumbai Airport has seized 40 million. The airport authorities have confiscated 2.4 million. Within 48 hours, a large quantity of fake currency was seized. However, compared to the 120 billion, these amounts were merely a drop in the ocean. The police chief astutely sensed that they must have overlooked something. What could they be missing? Just then, Little May noticed something unusual. She brought over a cash detection machine and inserted one of the seized counterfeit notes. Immediately, the machine emitted a shrill alarm. This meant that none of the seized notes were super counterfeits, but rather ordinary fakes previously produced by Mansoor. Mansoor was just trying to divert our attention. He's actually planning a bigger shipment. Indeed, this was all a smokescreen set up by Mansoor. He had long ago planted moles within the police force. He transported the previous batch of counterfeit notes to India through multiple routes, deliberately allowing the police to discover them. With all routes under strict police monitoring, they needed to establish a new, safe route to successfully bring the fake currency into India. Sunny had rented a soon-to-be decommissioned cargo ship, using 3 containers to accommodate all the counterfeit money. However, just as the ship was approaching India, a phone call forced Sunny to immediately turn back. "Go anywhere but Alung," they were told. The criminal gang had received advance notice of the police's surprise port inspection. Going there now would be like walking into a trap. They had no choice but to cancel this trip and return. However, the captain refused their request. The ship no longer had enough fuel to go back, and being in deep waters, they could only continue forward. Just when everyone seemed at a loss, the captain came up with a bold idea. They decided to head to Mumbai, where there was a diving area. They could lower the containers to the seabed and quietly retrieve them at night. Thus, by exploiting this information gap, the criminal gang successfully smuggled 120 billion in counterfeit currency into India. However, the brothers had no idea that this money would soon become a hot potato. As the police were aware that the super counterfeits had not yet been successfully intercepted, they intensified their vigilance during this period. Consequently, potential buyers of the fake currency didn't dare to make any rash moves. This ultimately resulted in the 120 billion piling up in the warehouse. Mansoor, looking at the unsold banknotes, was furious. How come none of these have been sold? The news that followed only fueled his anger further. They had discovered an undercover police officer within their ranks. Mansoor, without hesitation, eliminated this traitor. Sunny and Little Handsome were terrified by this scene, unable to believe Mansoor's ruthlessness in sentencing a longtime subordinate to death without question. I can't stand seeing animals suffer, so I make it quick and clean. Otherwise, it'll keep howling. He'd been working for me for a long time, but rules are rules. A mess up is a mess up. Now, with all these fake notes, when can you sell them? This batch must be sold into the market quickly. All right. Do what you need to do, and do it fast. Faced with Mansoor's pressure, Sunny knew that if he couldn't deliver, his fate wouldn't be much better than the traitors. But how could they sell so much counterfeit currency now? To avoid attracting police attention, they exhausted every method to introduce the fake notes into the market. Despite using every possible approach and channel, it was still a drop in the ocean compared to the goal of selling 120 billion. Just then, a phone call brought a turning point. Sunny and his team received a call from an Indian MP who wanted to order 1 billion rupees. There was only one condition: Sunny had to conduct the transaction in person. At this critical juncture, with the police constantly investigating the counterfeit currency issue, hastily selling large quantities could easily alert the authorities. Caught between Mansoor's threats and the risk of arrest, Sunny chose the latter without hesitation. The next day, the two drove to the transaction location. Little did they know, it was a trap set by the police. The purpose of the face-to-face meeting was to arrest them. By the time they realized this, it was too late. The police had already surrounded the parking lot. Fortunately, Sunny remained calm under pressure and managed to escape temporarily. No one had seen their faces yet, and they used a pre-prepared delivery truck as cover. However, as they were leaving the parking lot, they were stopped by the police. "What are you doing here? Turn off the music. What are you doing here?" "We're from the cleaning company." "Say that again." "We found the car, but there's no one inside." They must have switched vehicles. Although they successfully broke out of the parking lot, the police were in hot pursuit. Luckily, Little Handsome had a quick idea. He slowly went to the back of the truck, lifted the cover, revealing the 1 billion rupees in counterfeit notes underneath. He then used a small knife to cut open the bags and began frantically scattering banknotes outside the vehicle. The notes fluttered from the truck onto the road. Passing drivers, overcome by greed, all stopped. Everyone went crazy, scrambling for the scattered notes on the ground. As more and more people came to pick up the money, traffic came to a complete standstill. This also halted the pursuing police. However, at this moment, Sunny lost focus and failed to avoid an obstacle. The vehicle crashed and overturned, spilling the remaining notes all over the ground. Just then, the police arrived, but to their surprise, the two occupants had already vanished. It turned out they had already left the vehicle and blended into the crowd. Thus, they successfully escaped right under the noses of the police. Meanwhile, passers-by continued to frantically pick up the notes. Little did they know that the money they were desperately stuffing into their pockets was all counterfeit. The brothers' plan to sell the fake currency had completely failed. Television news was flooded with reports about the counterfeit money. Strangely, there was no mention of the two brothers. Instead, only Mansoor's name was reported, saying he controlled the largest counterfeit currency ring and was funding organizations from enemy countries to fight against India. The media directly portrayed Mansoor as a traitor, causing countless people to be filled with resentment towards him. This too was a trap set by the police. Their purpose in only exposing Mansoor was to create suspicion within the criminal gang. Sure enough, when Mansoor saw the news, he panicked. He began to suspect that Sunny and Little Handsome had been caught by the police and had betrayed him. It turned out this was all part of the police's strategy. They knew Mansoor was the mastermind behind the counterfeit currency operation. Only by leveraging media hype could they expand their influence and expose the mastermind. Meanwhile, Sunny naively believed that he still had value to Mansoor and thought he would surely help him out of all troubles. He then contacted Mansoor's subordinates for a meeting. But the two were completely unaware of Mansour's intentions. Since the recent news and public opinion exposure, Mansour had already planned to eliminate them. The incident of Sunny trying to sell 1 billion in fake currency had been exposed, and he absolutely couldn't risk using the two again. We can't take this risk anymore. Just as the subordinates were about to eliminate the two brothers, the roar of engines was heard in the distance. A large group of motorcycles came roaring in. It turned out Sunny had been prepared. Before getting in the car, he had turned on his phone's location tracking, allowing friends to come to the rescue in case of danger. Thus, the two successfully escaped from Mansour's grasp. But Sunny knew Mansour wouldn't let them off so easily, so the two planned to lay low for a while. Just then, a phone call left the brothers completely devastated. It was from their uncle, who sorrowfully informed Sunny that something terrible had happened. Their grandfather's newspaper office had caught fire the night before, and it wasn't extinguished until this morning. Their grandfather had tragically perished in the fire. Upon hearing this, Sunny was thunderstruck. His grandfather was the person he loved most in this world. His initial purpose for getting into the counterfeit business was to keep his grandfather and the newspaper office where he had grown up alive. Now everything was gone. The culprit behind all this was none other than Mansour. Mansour had always used their grandfather to blackmail the two of them, as he was always their weak point. Now that their grandfather had been murdered, Sunny's anger had reached its boiling point. The next day, Sunny told Little Handsome to wait for him at the station. His goal was to seek revenge on Mansour. Little Handsome naturally understood what he was going to do and wanted to accompany him, but Sunny refused. They still had their uncle, and at least one of the brothers needed to survive to take care of him. After Little Handsome left, Sunny picked up his gun and prepared to settle scores with Mansour. He secretly infiltrated Mansour's counterfeit money factory, shooting down his henchmen one by one. Finally, he took Mansour's uncle hostage and opened the vault door. Inside were their 120 billion in counterfeit notes. Just as Sunny entered the vault, Mansour coincidentally called his uncle. Sunny answered without hesitation. Seeing it was Sunny, Mansour panicked. Sunny didn't waste words. He positioned the phone and then picked up a can of gasoline, preparing to give Mansour a live broadcast. Watching Sunny about to burn all the fake money, Mansour frantically begged him to calm down. Your grandfather's death was truly an accident. I only meant to burn down the newspaper office to teach you a lesson. I never intended for your grandfather to die. Sunny watched silently, saying nothing. All his anger had turned into action. He began continuously spraying gasoline onto the fake notes. Seeing that Sunny wasn't buying his act, Mansour resorted to threats. However, the current Sunny was unstoppable. He left behind a powerful statement: no matter where you hide, even at the ends of the earth, I will find you and personally avenge my grandfather. Then he casually tossed the lighter onto the fake notes. And so, a whole warehouse full of 120 billion in counterfeit currency was reduced to ashes. But Sunny's journey was far from over. He was about to embark on his true path of revenge.